Hey, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co, and today I'm reviewing Windmill Valley from Board and Dice. Windmill Valley is a 1 to 4 player, medium weight Euro game that ultimately relies on this rondel mechanism to slowly rotate and take turns from the various actions available to you in order to drive endgame and your points. And I mean that, both endgame and your points, there's two different things happening here. Let's talk first about how you score points. You're going to score points in the game through a variety of things, but I'd say that a bulk of your points are going to come from your endgame scoring. And the way those are going to work out are first from your tulip fields over here. You're going to have tulip fields in which you're planting various tulips onto the board, and you're going to get points both for the values of the individual tulips, assuming you've planted the requisite number of assuming you've built the requisite number of windmills. So if I've gotten 1/3 of those 3 windmills and placed them onto the board, then my violet tulips over here, my purple tulips, are going to be worth 3 points each. That little crown symbol is points. So the first way you get points is build your windmills and plant tulips of that color. That will give you a whole lot of points. Secondly, from that, you're going to score points based on the rows and the way you structure your rows. You're placing tulips into these rows over here, and you'll get points for having tulips of either the different or the same colors in the rows and columns. So for example, this tells you that this row over here is worth 8 points if you have a full row of tulips all of the same color, and it's worth 4 points if you have a full row of tulips, full stop. That's going to be true of each of the 4 rows, different points per row, which means you can get a bunch of points for having tulips of the same color in each row. And then the third way, actually there's 4 ways to score points in the game, the third way you score points is going to be for the columns. The columns over here are going to have a similar thing, but slightly different. Over here you can see that if I have columns of the same, if I have 2 tulips of the same color in a column, I lose 5 points for this first column, and if there's 4 different tulips, I gain a point, and that's going to go up in terms of the points you gain, and down in terms of the points you lose as you move further along, again trying to incentivize you to have rows of the same color and columns of different colors, but you're also trying to make sure you plant the number of windmills in order to get as many tulips as possible, and so you're trying to juggle a whole bunch of things to maximize your points going there. The last thing that's going to give you points at the end of the game are going to be these cards. These are cards you can earn during the game that either go above your board to give you an ongoing ability or below your board to give you point scoring. So for example, over here, this is going to give you an extra 2 points for each of those purple tulips, which means if you get this card, you really want to lean into those purple tulips, possibly doing so at the cost of having multiple colors in different rows just to maximize how many points you can get over there. That's going to be the main things you're trying to do to score points at the end of the game. There'll be points in-game as well, but those are the main things you're trying to do. Which means effectively, if you followed me so far, the basic idea is get those cards and build tulips. Which brings us to the turn structure. What are you actually doing in the game? What triggers endgame? All of that. The thing you're doing in the game is every single turn you're going to start by raising or lowering the water level. I'm going to skip that first in order to first show you how your actual wheel works. So I'm going to skip to step 2 because it'll make a lot more sense to go back to step 1 after. So step 2 of a round is you're going to go ahead and rotate your wheel and take the action of one of these 2 spots. Okay, so you're going to take an action of one of these 2 spots, and in this case I can either lower the water level, which we're going to come back to, or I can go ahead and take one of these shipping actions where I can export tulips from my board in order to take a variety of actions on this grid. That's going to be 6 different actions you can take on this wheel, and which action you take is going to heavily influence what you're doing as well as what you're building to. The tricky part is you can only move 1. Except you actually can move more than 1 on this wheel. There are 2 ways to adjust the speed that your wheel moves and therefore the action you take. The first are tools. You can pay tools to adjust up or downwards the number of spaces your wheel moves in order to take an action. With a minimum number of movement of 1, you always have to move the wheel at least 1, time moves ever onwards, and you can do a maximum movement of 4 by paying extra gears, extra tools to move your wheel more as you go through this. The second way that you can go ahead and modify the wheel is that water level. Because the first thing you do every turn is you decide how many levels you want to raise the water level. Let's say in my case, I'm going to raise it to the top. I'm going to raise it to 3 over there, which means I'm going to pay 1, 2, 3 coins. I'm going to get 1, 2, 3, 4 points, adjusting my points in the point track, and the water level is going to move up 2 over here, 1, 2, and then you move your wheel a number of spaces equal to the current water speed. This section over here defines how much higher the water level moves, and also how many spaces you move on your rondel, and if I pay an extra tool, I can go ahead and increase that 3 to 4 and go 1, 2, 3, and 4 and take a build windmill action. That's going to be the way that little water level system works. Now you can lower the water level to 0 or to 2 at any amount. You don't have to pay to lower the water level. And additionally, if the water level here is already at the highest, then you have to keep it at 1 because you cannot raise the water level with these two if this spot over here is already at the highest it can be. Which takes us to your action over here. Because remember I told you can choose one of these two sides? One of the sides you can take on this entire board is always that side, at least until you upgrade this wheel, is lowering the water level by 2. And when you do so, you go 1, 2, and for each level you lower, you can take 2 coins or 2 points, whichever one you want, or in this case, you can take 2 and 2, or 4, because you lowered the water level. That would be your action for the round. The other actions over here on the wheel, we're going to go through them pretty quickly to show you how they work over here, starting from the very get-go. This first action is going to be how you actually plant tulips. If you have tulips in your reserve, let's pretend we do over here, and you're actually going to start with some, and you can gain others. If we take this action over here, we can go ahead and take a plant 2 tulips action and put it in any rows we want. You do have to go left to right, but you can choose any rows you want. Obviously, I'm incentivized to put these two same in the same row, and I'll put it over here, and I'll put it in this row, and I'll take a coin as a bonus, adjusting my coin upward by 1. This little symbol here is the planted tulips action. It's one of the main ways, it's the only way you get tulips. Well, the symbol is the only way, but you can find that symbol in multiple places. That's going to be how you plant tulips into your little patch over here. The next action over here is taking tulips. Let's pretend we have some in a reserve. Taking tulips from your reserve over here. This is where you can store your tulips until you plant them or do other things with them. This lets you take them, placing it on the card over here, and then you can take the action of the 2 linked spots. So for example, over here, I could take, let's just show you the actions you know already. I could take a plant action as well as 3 points. Alternatively, instead, you can take back all the tulips already on the card and then cycle to the next card. So you have 2 options there, either taking the actions next to your stored bulb, or alternatively taking back all the bulbs that other players have already placed there. And you also have to place a different bulb than what was already placed there, which means at first you're going to place your lower value bulbs you don't want, but if other players got there first, you might have to place a higher bulb in order to take that action. The next action, and my favorite one in the game, is going to be upgrading. This lets you take an upgrade tile, either one of the basic ones for free, a slightly medium one for $1, or the higher one for $2, and placing them onto your board into anything except for the active spots. So I can pay $2, lower my cost by 2, and place it over here because I'm going to move to that spot next turn, and I'll be able to take that action next turn. And the tricky part over here is specifically the way this operates is that this, you see this plus in the corner over here and over here? That means I can do both the actions if there's a plus in the corner. So sometimes you're augmenting so you can do both actions, and other times you might just be improving the action. So for example, if I place this on top of this windmill over here, instead of just doing a windmill building, I can get a windmill building and a coin. Or alternatively, if I don't actually want to ship my bulbs out, I can get multiple windmill plantings on this rondelle wheel. You can augment your rondelle wheel on either side, and pluses will let you go ahead and take double actions on that turn. That's going to be this action when you take that upgrade action. You also can pay $1 in order to refresh the upgrade market. So you can pay $1 over here to completely cycle out those markets. You can do that once on your turn. The next action is going to be how you get those upgrade cards. You can also once again pay $1 to cycle the market, and then you can go ahead and take one of these cards, taking it either for its endgame ability, sliding it underneath your board over here, or alternatively for its in-game ability, placing it up here, and you actually will start with an ability. You're going to start the game with an ability, and you could proxy things out, you could replace stuff, and as you build up more abilities, you're going to get 1, 3, and 6 points as well, so you want to try to get more abilities, both for the in-game abilities they give you, as well as the points they're going to give as well. And that brings us to the second last action over here, which is building a windmill. Building a windmill lets you build a windmill onto the board. So what you're going to do is you're going to take one of your windmills, and again, you're trying to think through which tulips you're trying to plant, and therefore which ones you want to score, and you're going to place it out somewhere onto the board, starting from a pathway that connects to the center square. So for example, I can go here, or here, or here, or I think down here as well, and then you go ahead, let's show you up here so you can see it, and then you take the actions that those arrows point to. So in this case, I can take a tool, and I can also take a yellow tulip and add it to my board if I place it there. Now, this first spot over here is free, but subsequent spots as you go cost different amounts of money, but you always do have to chain back to the center. So if another player were to build their windmill over here, they would have to pay $1, they would get these 2 fields, and because they made that pathway through mine, I would also get a point. So as you get those starting spots, you can also get a whole bunch of points from other players as they chain their windmills back to the center through your windmills. You always have to take the shortest route, and you don't get points for your own windmills, but you will get points if you chain through others. Which brings us to the last action. The last action is possibly the most complicated, but it's not that complicated, it just might be the most. This is the marketplace action. You pay $2 as shown in the corner, because different spots on the board will have different amounts you pay. So for example, in this one you pay 0, but you only do it once. Over here you pay 2, but you get to do it twice. So they'll have different configurations you'll find in different places. And in this case, over here you pay 2, and you get to do it 3 times. So that would be a great upgrade for that spot. But in any case, you pay 2 right now, and then you get to go ahead and move 2. So what that works is you pay $2, you lower your dollars by 2, and then over here you find your disc, and you can move 2, for example 1, and then 2, taking the actions at the spots you stopped at. So for example, at this first spot, what I can do is I can take this action, I can take any of these actions twice. Why twice? Because there's 2 markers, including my own over there. So I can take 2 yellow tulips, 2 violet tulips, I can plant 2 whites or plant 2 reds. But then as I go over here for my second action, I can then go again and then take any of these actions 3 times. I can take 3 whites, 3 reds, or plant 3 of the purples over here, and you cannot split it up. You can't do one of each. You have to do that action that number of times. Now before you take this action, you do have 2 options. You can go ahead and pay $1 to move a neutral disc, which will change where there's more discs on the board, and also you can pay $1 to land on discs, meaning right now if red were to go, they would skip this market because it's full, but you could pay $1 to go on top of it. You still only take the action 3 times, but it helps you take an action at an otherwise clogged market that you are trying to benefit from. That's the core cycle of what you're doing in this game. You're going to go ahead and start by adjusting the water level. That might get you points, it might not. Then you'll go to your board, rotate a certain number of spots, minimum 1, maximum 4, adjusting it based on tools and the water level, generally moving 1 spot, but that can change depending on your player group and also how mean they are. From there, you're going to take a bunch of actions, including upgrading your player board, upgrading your cards for in-game and end-game scoring, planting bulbs, gathering bulbs, expedited shipping out to this foreign market over here, building windmills on the board to take cooler and cooler spots in the game. So over here we get those 2 things over here. Once we go here, we're getting 3 things, an upgrade and a violet tulip and a market action. And you're trying to build out all of this in order to get as many points as possible. Now, how does game end trigger? Every time your little section over here rotates back to that red arrow, you're going to advance your disc over here, getting the bonus in that box, and one of the bonuses over here before blocking it for other players. So for example, I can get a tulip of any color and $3, and then block this. No one else can take that, so other players will get a little less as they go along. And once this hits the end, that will trigger end game. So you get a certain number of rotations of your wheel before game end will trigger, at which point all players will get 1 more turn, although in the rulebook it says you could get just 1 last turn if you want, depending on how strict you want to be or how well you know the game, and that will trigger game end and game end scoring. That is how you play Windmill Valley. Which brings us to the review. The review, so with what I like, don't like, can see others not liking, starting off with what I like. There's a bunch of things that I do enjoy about Windmill Valley, especially because of the sheer amounts of powers and abilities that are going on here. This is a game which you're going to be heavily upgrading your player board through a ton of these abilities, and if I say heavily upgrading, I mean you absolutely should be, or you're probably losing the game with a small caveat that I'll get to, but in general you're going to want to upgrade your player board because if other players are getting extra money and extra actions and all of this throughout the game, and you're just doing your same old, you will almost certainly lose to their engine with some possible caveats. And so powers and abilities are going to be galore in this game, not just because you have this 1 spot on the board where you can do it, but you often can chain multiple things. Like for example, those 2 tulips I planted, I could put them in the bottom row to get those upgrades as fast as possible and really get my board up and running. Especially if you have this one over here where every time you get an upgrade, you get to also go ahead and get a tulip. You can get your engine moving very quickly if you focus very heavily on those upgrades and then buy things that will reward you for upgrades. Every time you do an upgrade, you lower the water level. That will help you give you money back in your game. Whenever you take a market action, you get an upgrade. You can stagger your entire board to feed into certain things that you're good at doing, and that will give you a ton of powers and abilities around what you're doing in this game, around how you operate. The asymmetric start, the fact that you're going to start with different abilities, is also going to push you in different directions and incentivize you as to what things are slightly better for you compared to the other players. So the combination of the powers and abilities of this main board, the combination of your asymmetric start, the combination of filling up your abilities over here with 4 different abilities, the combination of filling up your endgame scoring with 3 different things that also feed into what you're doing, trying to find your pathway, because there are slightly different pathways you can do. You can focus on getting a lot of windmills out. You can focus on a ton of upgrades. You can focus on getting the cards as fast as possible. You can focus on the foreign market. Again, everything's going to depend on what you do, the abilities you buy, and then feeding into doing that particular thing very well. And because there's always a ton of ways to get to the same things. Every symbol that you have on your player board can be found elsewhere and will give you other ways of getting it. And so you're never limited to just one thing you can do. While I do think you have to dabble a little bit in everything, the things you specialize in, that will change change game to game, and there's a lot of ability to kind of choose your own pathway forward as far as how that specialization will work. This is a game that plays in a relatively absorbable time frame. I'd say in the around 90-minute range. I think you could easily get it down to 60. I think box says 40, yeah, box is 40 up to 90, so I think that makes sense. You can get it down to 60 easily, especially players who know the game, but it's one that can move very fast, give you a lot to do in a short time frame, and give you different ways to kind of pursue that while trying to think through as well the end game scoring. Are you leaning into linear rows and columns that match the prescribed scoring, or are you building a whole bunch of a certain windmills just to get the high value tulips out and not caring about the columns and penalties there, just so you can get a chunk of extra points? Again, that extra 2 points for those purples, combine that, and I don't care at all what the board wants me to do. I'm just going full purple all the way on that board to get as many points as I possibly can from the game. As far as things I don't like in the game, they're not a ton, but they are definitely present. The two biggest things are going to be, first of all, this dam system over here and adjusting the water level. I don't like this at all. Nothing about this do I enjoy about the game for two main reasons. Because there's kind of two ways the game can play, and either way, I don't like this addition to the game. The first way the game can play is what I find more common, is the fact that more often than not, players are going to be trying to move one, maybe two spots at a time. And two spots you can manage through tools. You don't need the dam for that. Obviously it's a system, but you can get to that adjustment of your rondelle in multiple ways, and I think the whole dam system kind of is a little bit, doesn't feel as relevant when most people are trying to maximize how much time they get out of the turn. And the reason for that is when the game ends, when game end is triggered, it's triggered for everyone. This is not like Everdell where you can finish at different points. If I trigger endgame because I'm constantly moving multiple spots, I have to go this way. If I'm constantly moving multiple spots and therefore triggering the endgame much quicker than other players, that's going to force everyone's game to end. And so players are constantly trying to get as much done. I find the people I've been playing with, including myself, generally we're like, we want to do as much as possible with our engine. We're not trying to ramp up the endgame, and so we don't move that fast, because if we put an upgrade on our board, we want to benefit from that upgrade, and you already have a limited number of cycles, so we're trying to maximize how much we can get out of the game, which makes this a kind of unnecessary puzzle and less fun to have in the game if you're going that way. Granted, you needed a little bit to manage the water levels and get things back from it, but again, because there's multiple ways to get money and points, you don't need it. It's a thing you can interact with in the game. The other way it plays out is also a way I don't like it, where somebody can go through the game and intentionally try to ramp up the speed of the game as fast as possible, because if you two are playing for the long game and building all your upgrades and going the slow way, I can sit there and say, who cares if this is a 30-point game? As long as I have 30 and you only have 28, I still win. So if you're playing the long game, I will simply ramp up the speed as fast as possible, try to trigger endgame as soon as I possibly can, and ta-da! Look, none of us really did a lot, but game end is over, and I won 30 points to 27. Doesn't matter, the last game you got 152 points. This is a short game because I played efficiently. I don't like that you can do that. I don't like that a person can sit there and try to play efficiently, and it would be efficient to try to tank other players' strategy by rapidly accelerating the endgame, and you can rapidly accelerate the endgame. So either way, this entire dam section, which is a big part of the game, a big part of what makes the game unique and all that, I don't like its existence in the game. It's either unnecessary or it's utilized in a way I don't like, and both of those take away from my experience in a game that already you only have a number of limited amounts to actually benefit from the upgrades you're building, and having a player ramp through the game completely changes the way you're going to interact with it and just makes it a less fun experience. The second issue I have with it, and again, I said there's not a lot of issues, but they are both there. The second issue I have with it is that I'm seeing limited reasons to pursue anything but the higher bulbs. Meaning, in this game, you're usually not going to be filling out the whole chart. Even in a slower game where players are taking their time with things, you're not going to fill out your whole section over here, which means I usually find limited reason to engage in the lower value windmills. Almost always, you want the bulbs that are worth 2 and 3 points instead of the bulbs that are worth 1, because they're not hard enough to get that you need to worry about that. Now, I don't think you can just specialize in purple. I think that would be too restrictive, but usually it's in your best interest to try to specialize in 1 or 2 of the higher colors, and I'm not seeing as much of a reason to just go for the lower ones. You don't need to worry about getting enough windmills out. And again, maybe this changes a bit if you're playing a rapidly accelerated game. I don't fully know. But overall, this whole track of the windmill concept I think is great. But for me so far in my games, I have seen that you usually are going to be rewarded for investing in higher value bulbs and kind of ignoring the lower value bulbs, which kind of puts a system in play that doesn't need to exist. Now again, that might be my experience. Maybe you're playing it with groups and you're like, oh my gosh, no, the whites and the yellows, that's where the game is at. You need to play those. Maybe. But I've played fairly well in the game. I've won most of the games I've played. I've never dabbled in them. I've never seen the player who won dabble in them, and they don't seem to be They seem to be a thing that exists but doesn't need to be interacted with, which is similar, that's slightly different from my complaint about the dams. As far as I can see others not liking, first of all, the cascading turns can get to be a lot to follow. This game is very often going to have you doing things to get upgrades, to take both spots, to trigger your people. You're going to be doing a lot of stuff. Now you built a windmill, you have triggered those actions. That's going to give you a new upgrade. That does that. There's a lot of things happening in the game that can certainly make it not just an issue of downtime. I don't think the downtime is that bad, but there can be downtime when someone takes a longer turn, but more an issue of just not really caring what other players do, because I'm not going to watch everything you do and make sure it was kosher the whole time, which means most of the time I'm like, yeah, just let me know when you're done, do your things. Oh, that triggers that triggers that, okay, cool, you got 4 extra tulips, I don't know, I'm not tracking. There can be an aspect of not following others and then kind of tapping out of the experience they're having, because just do what you're doing. I'll semi have an awareness, but you could be cheating or messing up or screwing up the rules. I don't know, because it's hard to follow the cascading turns. You also have to kind of upgrade to be in contention. I talked about this a little already, and again, that might be different if you have a person rapidly accelerating the end game, but in general, you have to kind of pursue upgrades as fast as possible to make your engine slightly better compared to other players, and frankly, I think if you don't, you probably won't be having, you probably will not be having as ideal of a game compared to the other players. As far as final thoughts on Windmill Valley, I really enjoy Windmill Valley. I'll start with the fact that to me this is a 4 out of 5. It's a good game, I really enjoy it, I've had a lot of fun with it, I think it's really solid. My first play started off high on that. My first play I was like, oh my gosh, the powers, the abilities, the cascading, there's so much going on here, I love it. The more I played it, the more the issues with the tulips, the more the issues with the dam kind of get into the way of my enjoyment a bit in the game. And again, still a 4 out of 5, still a very good game, but it's one that has a lot of things really going for it, and then some things that just kind of, I feel like it almost needs to be a drop cleaned up, at least for me, not necessarily for others. You know, it's a great game, it's well rated, it's well liked, but for me and the things I want out of it, I feel I want Windmill Valley with some adjustments and changes to it. Based on my first play, after my first play, I was ready to put in my top 100. I didn't, because I try to not put games in my top 100 after one play unless there's a really, really good reason. But I was like, you know what, let's hold off, let's see where it is next year. And I'm glad I held off, because subsequent plays have kind of lowered the level to which I like this. While I still do like it, I still think it's a lot of fun, I still think it's a very short rulebook, a relatively absorbable game time, plays well at different player counts, and gives you a lot of fun things to focus on. There is a lot here to enjoy, but not without some critiques as well. A 4 out of 5. As far as other game recommendations, if you like this kind of cascading, do a lot of things on your turn, definitely check out Encyclopedia, a game that I enjoy very, very much. It's a great game, highly recommended, but also has an aspect where everything you do is going to cascade into multiple options. And then similarly, Unconscious Mind, a recent favorite of mine, is going to have a ton of everything you do has cascading benefits. And so if that kind of thing gets you going, all 3 of these are games that should be on your radar. In any case, and until next time, I'm Alex Radcliffe from Board Game Co. I hope you found this video helpful, and as always, I hope you have a good one.